Dear students, welcome to Brilliant Minds e-learning school. This presentation is for grade 10, novel part. Macbeth, which was written by William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare wrote this novel to examine the nature of evil and the corruption of human. Let's talk about the author, William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was called England's national poet. He is considered the greatest dramatist of all times. His works are loved throughout the world. He was an English poet, playwright, and actor of the Renaissance era. William Shakespeare had plot structure or philosophy point of view, which appears in all his novels and plays, in which he introduced the characters in phases, levels, stages. The first stage, he introduced the main characters who had natural harmony with the world, that they lived normally at the beginning of the life, till a point. In this point, stage or phase 2 starts. In the second stage, problems begin. Things go wrong. Actions are taken, moved, and rose, which is called rising actions. As the story moves, there is chaos, disorder. The harmony between the main characters and the world is lost. In the fourth stage, which is climax or conflict, the struggle or the fight between the characters. This is the most boiling point. You will find crimes, more blood. The main characters are involved and suffer from pain. Till the last stage and the fifth one, order is regained. The right people in control again. The harmony between the nature, the world, and the characters appears once more. To have a good novel, to attract the readers and the audience, you must mention 5 elements. Elements of drama. Can you remember them? What are the elements of drama? Setting, characters, plot, conflict, and themes. Setting. When and where did this story happen? Characters. Divided into 2 parts. Protagonist, the main characters, and antagonist, the minor roles. The plot. The sequence of actions. How the play or the novel goes on. Conflict is the fight, the argument, the problem between the characters. And the last point, themes, the ideas which are shown between lines. Let's start with the first one, setting. As we said, when and where did this story happen? Can you remember? Macbeth was set during the 11th century in Scotland. which was a separate country, although its closeness to England, which led to many struggles over who would own the area. The second one, characters. As we said, protagonists, main characters like Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Banquo, and so on. And antagonists, like the knights, noblemen who appeared for a short time. Kindly check your booklet as we had this before. Take it as a reference. Let's talk about the summary plot. The play opens on thunder and lightning as the three witches decided to meet Macbeth. In the following scene, Duncan, the King of Scotland, was reported that his generals Macbeth, who was the Thane of Glamis, and Banquo had just defeated the force of Norway and Ireland, who were led by Macdonald and the Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth was praised for his bravery. In the following scene, Macbeth and Banquo discussed the weather and their victory. As they were on their way back, they met three witches. The three witches entered and greeted them with three prophecies, three predictions for the future. Though Banquo challenged them first. They addressed Macbeth, hailing him as Thane of Glamis, Thane of Cawdor, and that he would be the future of Scotland as to be the king. Macbeth appeared to be stunned to silence. When Banquo asked of his own share, the witches responded saying that he would be less than Macbeth, but happier, less successful, but more, as he would be a father of a line of kings, though he himself wouldn't be one. The witches vanished, and another Thane, who was called Ross, arrived and informed Macbeth of his new title, Thane of Cawdor. And by this, the first prophecy is fulfilled, and Macbeth immediately began to harbor ambitions of becoming a king. King Duncan welcomed and praised Macbeth and Banquo as they proved victory for their country, Scotland. He declared that he would spend the night at Macbeth Castle. He also named his son Malcolm as his heir, so the chance of Macbeth to be a king is far away. Macbeth sent a message ahead to his wife, Lady Macbeth, telling her about the witch's prophecies and what happened with him, and that he became the Thane of Cawdor. And they told them that he would be the upcoming king. Lady Macbeth suffered none from her husband's uncertainty and wished him to murder Duncan in order to obtain kingship, and that will happen when the king comes to their castle. When Macbeth arrived, she overrode all of her husband's objections by challenging his manhood and successfully persuaded him to kill the king that very night. He and Lady Macbeth planned to get Duncan's two chamberlains drunk so that they would black out, and the next morning they would blame the chamberlains for the murder. Well, surely they would be defenseless, as they would remember nothing. While Duncan, the King of Scotland, was asleep, Macbeth stabbed him. Despite his doubts and a number of supernatural evil events, including visions of bloody dagger, he was so shaken that Lady Macbeth had to take charge. By this, Macbeth reached the highest, which we called, climax. In accordance with her plan, she framed and got Duncan's sleeping servants involved for the murder by placing bloody daggers on them. Early the next morning, Lennox, he was a Scottish nobleman, and Macduff, the loyal Thane of Fife, arrived. Macbeth led them to the king's chamber, where Macduff discovered Duncan's body. Macbeth murdered the guards to prevent them from professing their innocence, and not to leave any clue behind him. He did so in a fit of anger over their misdeeds or sins. Duncan's son, Malcolm, and Donald Penn fled and escaped to England and Ireland, fearing that whoever killed their father, he might kill them too. The rightful heir's flight made them suspects. Banquo remembered the witch's prophecy about how his own descendants, his sons, would inherit the throne, and this made him suspicious of Macbeth. Despite Macbeth's success, he also was aware of this part of the prophecy, that Banquo's son would be kings after him. Macbeth invited Banquo to a royal banquet party, where he discovered that Banquo and his young son, Fleance, would be riding out that night. For this, Macbeth ordered some people to kill them away of the castle. Macbeth arranged to have him murdered by hiring 2 men to kill them, later sending a 3rd murderer. These men succeeded in killing Banquo's close friend, but Fleance, his son, escaped. Macbeth became furious. He was afraid that his power remained insecure as long as the heir of Banquo remained alive. At the banquet, during the party, Macbeth invited his lords and Lady Macbeth to a night of drinking. Banquo's ghost entered and sat in Macbeth's place. Macbeth looked fearfully at him, startling his guests, as the ghost is only visible to Macbeth. The others panic at the sight of Macbeth looking and talking to an empty chair, as they can't see the ghost. Until a desperate Lady Macbeth told them that her husband is exhausted and he must leave. The ghost left and returned once more, causing the same anger and fear in Macbeth. This time, Lady Macbeth told the lords to leave, and they did so. So Macbeth was a brave good knight at the beginning of his life, till his ambition led him to commit crimes and murders. Macbeth became a king, and the 3rd prophecy was done. He was afraid that Fleance, the son of Banquo, would come again and take his position. So Macbeth paid a visit to the 3 witches that he met before. He asked them to reveal the truth of their prophecies to him. And to answer his questions, Each one of them offered predictions and prophecies to put Macbeth's peers at rest. The first one, they told him to be careful of Macbeth. Then, they told him that no one was born of a woman would be able to harm him. And the last one, that Macbeth would be safe until great Burnham Wood in the forest comes to his castle. He would stay king till the forest moved. Macbeth felt secure because he knew that all men were born of women and forests couldn't move. Macbeth also asked whether Banquo's sons would ever stay in Scotland. He realized that these were all Banquo's descendants, having acquired kingship in numerous countries, so they won't come back. Lennox entered and told Macbeth that Macduff had fled to England. At this time, Macbeth ordered Macduff's castle to be seized, is to kill each one there in Macduff's castle. He sent murderers to kill Macduff as well as Macduff's wife and children. Although Macduff is no longer in the castle, everyone in his castle was put to death, including Lady Macduff and their young son. What do you think Macduff would feel? Murders started to increase. Meanwhile, Lady Macbeth became full of guilt from the crimes she had and her husband had committed. At night, in the king's palace, a doctor and a gentlewoman discussed Lady Macbeth's strange habit of sleeping walking. She started to sleep and talk to herself, imagining blood in her hand, the same like her husband Macbeth, who had some visions of a dagger. Suddenly, Lady Macbeth entered the inner trance, full asleep, with a candle in her hand, confessing and telling what she did and committed, confessing the murders of Duncan, King of Scotland, Lady Macbeth and her child, and the last one, Banquo. She tried to wash off imaginary blood stains from her hands. All of this was happening in front of the doctor and the gentlewoman, the nurse. All the while speaking of the terrible things she knew, she pressed her husband to do. She left then, and the doctor with the nurse were sure that she went into madness. Her belief that nothing could wash away the blood on her hands. On the second part in England, Macduff was informed by Ross that his castle was gone, as Macbeth killed each one there, including his wife and his son. When this news of his family's execution reached him, Macduff was stricken with grief and asked for revenge. He hated Macbeth. Prince Malcolm, who was Duncan's son, has succeeded in raising an army in England, and Macduff joined him as he wanted, as we said, to challenge Macbeth's forces to take his revenge too. Malcolm led an army along with Macduff against Macbeth's castle. While they were in the forest, they gave the soldiers some orders. The soldiers were ordered to cut down and carry 3 limbs to hide their identities and numbers. And by this way, the forest appears to be moved. Let's come back to Macbeth. inside his castle. What happened to Lady Macbeth? Before Macbeth's opponents arrived, before the enemies of him comes back, he received the news that Lady Macbeth had killed herself, and that caused him to sink into a deep pessimistic despair. He was so sad for her, though he reflected the meaninglessness of life, which means life had no meaning without his wife anymore. He was certain that the witch's prophecies guaranteed his victory. But he trembled when he learned that the English army was shielded with cuts from burning wood, and that was the first prophecy that the forest moves. A battle started. Macbeth showed that he had no reason to fear. He didn't fear Macbeth because the witches told him that no one can harm him who came from a woman, for he couldn't be killed by any man who was born of a woman. Macbeth showed that he was from his mother's womb, fulfilling the second prophecy. Macbeth realized too late that he had misinterpreted the witch's words, and though he realized that he was doomed, he continued to fight desperately, and he was sure inside himself that he is going to kill, or to be killed. Yes, to be killed. Macbeth killed Macbeth, and by this all the prophecies of the witches were done. Let's start with some themes relating to this novel or play. Ambition. Which one of the characters was ambitious and wanted things he might not deserve? Although Macbeth was encouraged by the witches, Macbeth's true downfall was his own ambition. Lady Macbeth was as ambitious as her husband, encouraging him to commit murder to achieve their goals. And we said that he was a good, brave knight, and he turned to be murderer. Both Macbeth and his wife failed to see how their ambition made them cross moral lines and would lead to their downfall. They committed crimes. So what? What did you gain? Lady Macbeth killed herself, and Macbeth himself was killed by, yes, Duncan's son. Once Macbeth killed Duncan, his ambition to hold on to his title as a king became larger. Rather than being able to enjoy the fruits of his ambition, he became obsessed with maintaining the power he had won. Macbeth's blind power could be contrasted with other ambitious characters in the play like Banquo. Banquo, his old and close friend, who had the same prophecy, but he didn't move to, he waited, because he was a good knight. Banquo also heard the witches' prophecies like Macbeth, and also had ambition for his sons. But unlike Macbeth, Banquo's morality prevented and stopped him from pursuing his goal at any cost, and he waited till the natural way achieve his ambition. At the end of the play, Macbeth had achieved all he wanted. He became the King of Scotland. But by the end, he had nothing. With his wife went and no hope of producing a prince, Macbeth saw what his unchecked ambition had cost him: the loss of all he had. The following theme is guilt. Macbeth's guilt about murdering his king Duncan and ordering the murder of his friend Banquo caused him to have guilty thoughts. Lady Macbeth also went insane from guilt over her role in Duncan's death. The fact that both characters suffered as the result of their actions suggested neither him or her was entirely cold-blooded. Although they committed terrible crimes, they knew that in what they had done was wrong. Their guilt prevented them from fully enjoying the power that they had. Lady Macbeth's guilt continued to destroy her, while Macbeth's guilt caused him to commit many murders and crimes in an attempt to cover up his initial crimes. Lady Macbeth's guilt drove her to insanity and finally suicide. We have some links here to watch the movie and some online quizzes to check your understanding. Thank you for listening. Until the next time, stay safe.